everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leaders Podcast. Leaders Podcast gives me the opportunity to speak to some of the most influential leaders in the intelligence and investigation space. Today, I'm really honored to be joined by a good friend and colleague, well-known Kitty Hailey. Welcome, Kitty. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you today.
Thank you. I am too. This is an honor, and it's nice to be included in this auspicious group of people. Thank you.
Before we get going, could you just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what type of work you do? And I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I've been in the industry for a very long time. I don't want to talk in decades, but there are 5 of them. And I started like everyone else with the curiosity and no experience and not knowing what to do. I have no background in police or intelligence work or anything. I'm just a girl from New Jersey who got involved. But part of it was because of a passion to do something more and to leave a mark that meant something. I had wonderful parents, and they've taught me to do good in this world. So investigating was something that it checked all the boxes. So I've been an investigator doing general practice work, but over the years, it's evolved into 2 particular areas. I do post-conviction work, which means that I work for people who are wrongfully incarcerated. And the United States has a major problem. There are so many people who have been in prison for 10, 20, 30 years who should never have been there in the first place. So that's a passion, and I'm really excited about doing that. And then the other thing I do is ethics. A long time ago, I learned I wanted to do something good that would have a lasting effect. I think the United States was pretty much the Wild West when it came to ethics. Investigators did anything they wanted to do, and I'm worried about my own reputation. And so I said, wait a minute, let me do something about it. So I started researching. I wrote a book on ethics, and 25 years later, I'm in the middle of my 5th edition. So that will be coming out probably next year.
Wow, fantastic. So let's start from the beginning, Kitty. Why investigation? Why did you choose this career? How did you get involved? If you weren't from a law enforcement or military background back then, which I suppose the industry's changed now, but maybe when you started, I would imagine most of the industry was made up from ex-forces or intelligence, right? Explain to me a little bit about that.
It kind of was a mistake, but it was a really good one. I was an art teacher.
Okay.
That's how I started. I was going to be an art teacher. I was going to have babies. I was going to be married and live a nice little suburban life. And then everything changed. I was working in Camden, New Jersey, which at one point was considered the murder capital of the United States.
Oh, wow.
I was at the high school, and I think I was 21 years old. And we were having race riots, and it was the time of Rodney King, who you may or may not remember, but it was a very tumultuous time. Martin Luther King had just died. John F. Kennedy had just died. There was such an interest in civil rights, and I was a 1960s, 70s hippie. And that's how I got started. I got involved in the school at a time that it was volatile. I became interested in working with some of the injustices that occurred, and I met the right people at the right time, ended up changing careers. And because I had no background in it, I studied it. I did everything I could to find out what an investigator should do. And I found out that nobody knew. People made it up as they went along, which is one of the reasons that I joined associations, National Association of Legal Investigators, Intelinet, different organizations that were interested in education. And since there were no volumes, I started writing. I started writing articles and eventually writing books. And I've written 5 books now for the industry, and I've written over 50 articles because if I couldn't find out how to do it, I researched it and found out how to do it and realized no one else knew. So I might as well write about it and tell you about it. And that kind of was the trajectory. So I've been writing and doing and by the seat of my pants, but it seems to have worked because I'm still here.
Yeah. So back then, are we talking the 70s then, or
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. I'm talking 5 decades ago.
5 decades
I
ago. So
I was, yeah, I was
yeah.
licensed in New Jersey. I think I was the first female investigator licensed in the state of New Jersey, and I think I was all of about 24 years old.
Jeez. So what was it like being a female investigator back then? Talk to me about the challenges and how difficult it was, or was it an advantage? I mean, talk to us about what it was like back then.
Being young is wonderful. So there's a lot of things you can do when you're young that you can't do when you're older. So yes, I could use the fact that I was a young, vivacious person to infiltrate, to do surveillance. I used my art background. We initially did a lot of domestic work, child nappings, following people, and that kind of thing, like everyone else does in the industry before I branched off and specialized. And so I could sit in a pair of jeans with a sketch pad in front of somebody's house and draw pictures of their house, and they would never even think anything of it. I was just a kid on assignment from a local school. And I would have my walkie talkie and I would let the team know that, okay, they're backing out of the driveway now. This is what she's wearing. This is what he's wearing. They went north. And then I would pack up my arts and crafts and I would go home and go to the next job. So, yeah, there were parts of it that were fun and easy. There were parts of it that were very difficult. I was not taken seriously by law enforcement. I would go in to court and they would laugh at me. I would get stopped by a police officer for following somebody because I was speeding, but they were speeding, obviously, because I was following them at the same rate. But I would get pulled over because I was a girl and they would laugh at, no, you're not an investigator. Don't give me that nonsense. So yeah, that was good and bad. And I realized something early on. Most people in the industry were going into a second profession. They had been in law enforcement. They had been in security. And now they were retired and they had just started. But I had been in this business since I was 24. And so I had more experience than people who were in the industry, more experience in running a business, more experience in life, because I had a broader background. And so I started speaking at conferences and I would stand up and here I was, this 29-year-old little girl. And there would be 75 men in the room, all over the age of 50. And my opening line was always, if you've been in business more than 5 years, raise your hand. And maybe 2 or 3 out of the entire room would raise their hand. And I'd look around the room and go, okay, I know more than you do. So take out your pens and start listening because you don't know how to run a business. You know how to be a security analyst at a company. You don't know how to be the head of a business that has to sell yourself to the public and that has to do a job thoroughly and do it right. And people listened. And I think it was a crazy belief that I couldn't do anything I need to do except go up in an airplane and jump out. I mean, I'm not very physical, but I trust myself cerebrally.
Yeah. I mean, how many times do you need to jump out of an airplane on a surveillance
Only
operation?
twice. It's
Only,
not a big
only
deal.
twice. What about your peers then? So if you're a young female in this industry, I think that would have been challenging back then. How were your colleagues, the other sort of senior guys in the industry? Was there any challenge there, or were you accepted as a peer back then?
It was very challenging. People were condescending to me. They treated me like, well, first of all, I've always just been this redheaded kid. All right. In my brain, I'm still a redheaded kid. It's just that I'm much older at this point. But I had to prove myself over and over and over again. I would walk into an attorney's office because the agency was getting a good reputation. And they would say, well, where's the boss? I wanted to speak to the boss, but I was the boss. I was married at the time to a former police officer, which was extremely helpful in teaching me the law. And he's the man who actually got me interested in being an investigator. And I remember that he had had a really serious problem. He had a cerebral aneurysm, and it caused him not to be able to think clearly, but he still looked perfectly fine. And we went to an appointment together because they insisted on seeing the man who was in charge of acumen protection and investigation, which was our business. He was not functional at that point. And I remember walking in and he looked really good, and he had his suit on and looked wonderful. And I was just, I tried to be as professional as I could. And we sat down, and a man sat opposite us and looked at him and said, "So Dick, tell me what you could do for me." And he turned to me, Dick turned to me and said, "You tell him." And I explained everything. And the man said, "Thank you, Dick." And then he said, "Well, how much is this service going to cost?" And Dick turned to me and I gave him a price. And he said, "Okay, fine." And then he wrote a check out and handed it to Dick, right? And we smiled and got up and walked out, got into the car. I drove, Dick handed me the check, and the rest was history. You do what you have to do.
Yeah.
It's always been difficult for women, not so much. We have really made a mark in this industry, and I am so proud of us. There are so many fabulous females who just do outstanding work. So I think the playing field is leveled, and in this industry, the income is leveled. There is no glass ceiling for women that is different than men. We are really equal here, and I love that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You are right. And everyone brings in unique skills to the table, which need to be used on all types of cases. What was it like with law enforcement and private investigator back then? The private public synergy. I love talking about this because it fascinates me. Different jurisdictions around the world have different relationships. What was it like back then, and how do you see that relationship now?
I find it really interesting that probably 60 to 70% of the investigators in our country were former law enforcement. They go from being one attitude to another, and the transition is difficult. Right. Because in law enforcement, there is not a lot of respect for private investigation. Yet, as soon as everyone gets out of law enforcement, the first thing they do is get their investigator's license. Yep. They're different jobs. They have nothing to do with each other, except that they deal with the law. We are on opposite sides of everything I do now in wrongful convictions and civil rights work. Totally opposite sides. They are the people who find evidence against an individual. I am the person that says you did it wrong. And I have sometimes difficulty with, especially men who were in law enforcement, who were of that era where locking up people of minorities was kind of what you did. You just suspected the black man before you suspected the white man. It hasn't changed much. And the thing that I always say is, if you did a righteous investigation and you found evidence that really existed, and if you really, really looked for other people and other suspects, and you did everything you were supposed to do, well, then I'm not going to find anything wrong with your investigation, and God bless you. However, if you falsified evidence or neglected another suspect or targeted a person because you just had a prejudice, well, then shame on you, because I'm going to reveal it. That person is going to walk out of prison, and you're going to be there with egg on your face. So it's always been a problem. However, there are so many men now and women who have transitioned out of law enforcement who are beginning to see that there was a right way to do it, and there was a brotherhood of blue that helped each other even when they were wrong. And they're recognizing that you can't do that, that humanity is important and individuals are important, and you've got to do what's right Otherwise, why are you doing this work? You know, we live supposedly in a democratic society, and we should be treating everyone that way.
So, with a wrongful conviction case, how does someone find you? Is there I mean, where is the right point to have a case independently investigated by someone like yourself?
I'm really interested in advocating for good investigation before there is a wrongful conviction. Unfortunately, there are so many people who are arrested, and because our public defender system is inadequate, they're asked to plead something out. There is no investigation done, or they can hire an attorney who doesn't do an investigation. If an investigation can be done first and done right, then no one has to be wrongfully incarcerated. However, the men and women I work with now have been in prison for 10, 20, or 30 years. And I've gone back and found information and evidence that was overlooked, neglected, or never found. And that's a crime. That's a real crime, that it takes 30 years to find the witness who the police interviewed but never told you about, to find the evidence that is in the evidence locker but was never revealed. And that's what we're doing. So I have the benefit of hindsight and history. I can go back and find these things. And it's easier for me now, but that poor individual has been in prison for 27 years and lost all of that time in life. So I'm really pushing for stronger investigation at the beginning. And I hope more attorneys will start to do that, that they'll bring in investigators and say, tell me what's going on. Tell me what really happened, because I don't want to plead out an innocent man. I want to represent him. So, I mean, it is a problem.
So, is your objective, Kitty, to find the truth, or is your objective to put the incarcerated individual stroke client in the best possible light under a wrongfully convicted case? Because as investigators, we dig deep and try and find the truth, but then is there a moral and ethical compass, and you write about ethics, that you're going through during an investigation?
It's interesting, Mike. I don't use the word truth because I think truth is very subjective. You believe in Christ or you believe in Muhammad, that is your truth, okay? And that's what you believe. I think truth is an interpretation of a fact. And so I don't look for truth. I look for information, evidence, and facts that will stand up in a court of law and be indisputable. So that might be a smoking gun, it might be DNA, it might be a witness who was incentivized by the police because she had a drug charge against her, and the police said, we're going to take your baby away and throw you in jail if you don't help us with this witness. And then 30 years later, you find that person, which I've done, and they break down in tears and say, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. I ruined someone's life. And they come forward at that time. And unfortunately, we're finding a lot of that. So I just I go back to the beginning of the case. I go to the day of the crime. I go to the scene of the crime, even if it's 25 years later, so that I can see it and document it and stand there and look around 365 degrees and see what really happened, right? What the environment was like. Now, it might have changed. So I'll go back and do old Google searches, or I'll go back and get city maps and see if anything changed. Could the crime have happened as it was determined? It might not have even been possible. It might not have been physically possible. And then you go from there and you review every piece of information and evidence, every police report, every day of the trial. You look at every member of the jury, who was eliminated, who was left on. I'm working a case right now where the individual was from Puerto Rico and didn't speak English and didn't understand what was happening in the trial. And then he was convicted. And he went to prison not knowing what happened or why. There's so many reasons that if someone had asked a question, they might have gotten an answer, but an attorney said, oh, he's probably guilty anyway, and never talked to the man, and probably couldn't have anyway because he didn't speak Spanish. So I don't know what we're going to find till we find it.
Sure.
All right. But I know I'm not going to stop looking, and I'm not going to leave it to AI to do the research. I'm going to do it myself so that I can then make logical conclusions based upon critical thinking, my critical thinking.
If the facts that you uncover point to the individual that's incarcerated, point to the individual having committed the offense, you would present those. You'd present the findings.
Court. I give everything to an attorney.
Right.
I give them the good, the bad, and the ugly. They need to be prepared in court. I tell them every crime that my client has committed, so that when the prosecution comes in and says, well, this man did X, Y, and Z, my attorney can say, yes, we know that. It's in the record, and not be shocked by it and not be blindsided by something they didn't know. I go into court only if I'm called into court. My job is to find information. I am not the judge of the jury. I don't know if my people are innocent or guilty until I find information. When I find them actually innocent, I am so incredibly excited, and I drive the attorneys crazy about follow through with this. Do you know this? Did you get that fact? Are you remembering this? And when I find information that they're not, I tell them that as well. Because again, I don't want a person out in society who is going to harm someone. My job isn't just to get them out. My job is to find if a citizen of the United States has been wronged by our system.
I want to talk to you now about ethics. And I know you've written about ethics. I've heard you speak passionately about ethics in the investigation world. And I think ethics and moral compass is a challenge that every investigator at some point will come across. What's the biggest challenge you think that an investigator that works in the private sector will face in terms of whether it be ethically or morally?
I think investigators aren't sufficiently versed in the law, and therefore they do what they've always done. And if they're police officers, they had much more authority to bang on a door and interview someone. They had much more authority to gather information any way they wished to under cover of the law. And I think you have to understand what you can and cannot do. And I think the biggest problem, I think, is the rights of the individual who an investigator is interacting with, whether that's the client or another investigator or a witness, okay? We have a really sexy profession. Everybody on television wants to be us, right? Everybody wants to write about us, and very few people actually know about us. I think the average book about investigators has every woman is magnificent and beautiful and sleeps with every client, and every man is macho and carries a gun and can walk into a police station and order people around. None of that is true. And you know that. None of that is true. So it's about understanding who we really are, being true to ourselves. This is my book. I wrote it in 2022, and I'm in the middle of writing the 5th edition right now because of AI, because that has changed the way we do things. We have duties to maintain confidentiality. The press wants to know what we're doing all the time. I get phone calls about my cases. I can't talk about them. There is no way I can talk about them. And I can't get information just because a client wants it. Just because a client says to me, can you find out how much money my opponent is making? We're running for office. And no, the answer is no, I can't. I can't. There is something called Gramm-Leach-Bliley that precludes me getting information about someone's financial base information unless there is a current court case and it's been ordered for a judgment. I can't do things that are illegal. I can't wiretap. I can't peek in people's windows. I can't put cameras in someone else's property. So I think the problem is most investigators think they can get away with things because they've seen it on television, or years ago Mannix did it, or I don't know, Miss Marple did it. But somebody did it and they think they can too. And the reality is, no, you can't. You have limitations to what you do. So we are not regulated. That's a problem. We're regulated by state, and we have too many states. There's a lot of us. We're a big country, and every state has different rules and regulations for investigators. But the one thing we basically have in common is that 25 years ago, I said, let's at least be ethical in the same way. And the National Association of Legal Investigators now uses my book as their ethics. Intelnet now uses my book as their ethics. 5 states in the United States now use my book as their ethics. And Portugal is trying to introduce it. So I'm hoping that people start to realize that it's a great profession. It can be fun. It can be sexy. It can be exciting. But if it's illegal and you can't take it into court, don't do it. If you can't use it as evidence, don't do it. Just stay away from it. You're going to get sued. You're going to lose your license, and then you've got nothing.
Some good advice right there. Associations, you touched on those slightly. How important is it for a young investigator, or even an experienced investigator, to get connected and get involved with local, state, and national, or international, for that matter, associations?
I think networking is the most important part of our business. Again, I'm old. Okay. So a long time ago, there were no classes or courses that I could take that would teach me to be an investigator. And I looked. I mean, I was 24 and calling every college in the area. And I actually got offered 2 jobs because they thought it was a great idea. But I wanted to learn. Okay. There are now classes and courses. There are now online courses, but the best place for education is through national associations and state associations, because they're concerned with elevating the level of knowledge of their constituency. And if you go to a conference, and we're running a conference in Philadelphia in about a month with Intellinet, we're going to have some amazing speakers that teach in all areas of investigation. And I have a couple of people that work for me, and someone said, well, what is the value of going to a conference? And the value is this: if you go to a conference and you learn something, that's amazing. If you go to a conference and you learn that you knew it already, that's also amazing. That means you understand that area of investigating. You understand that area of the law. Okay, I've checked that box. Now let's learn something that I didn't know. So you walk away with something, and then you meet colleagues and you meet friends. And Mike, I know you, and you're in the UK, and I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we would not have this connection if it were not for associations. I can call you if I have a problem. I have referred work to you. I have referred work to dozens and dozens, to literally hundreds of investigators around the United States. I tell people that I am a sole practitioner with a staff of 1,000.
Yeah.
I can pick up the phone and call a vetted, qualified investigator, because that's what associations do. They vet the people before they allow them to join. If you have a criminal background, if you've done things that are a little sleazy, if someone has complained about you, you're not going to get into any of these associations. So I know if you're on their list, I can call you and you're going to be a good guy. It's so helpful.
Yeah, completely agreed with you right there. I want to finish up with some advice that you would give the young guys that are coming into the industry that maybe are thinking about a first-time career, or are listening to this and thinking, wow, it seems quite a daunting career or environment to get involved in. Give you some sort of mentoring advice to the younger guys coming in.
I think that's really important. And I do mentor a lot of people. I get calls, I'm sure you do too, on a weekly basis. I'm thinking of going into the industry, or I'm transitioning jobs, or whatever. Do your research. There is something for everyone. And it's not just criminal, and it's not just civil. There are nuances, there's security. There are so many areas of investigation. But find out first what you like to do, and then look into what you can do in that area. It might be financial crimes. You might be an accountant who's just so tired of crunching numbers, but you're really good at finding mistakes. You can work in financial crimes. You can work in forensic accounting. You might be someone who really, really enjoys working with children. Well, there are so many times that interviewing children becomes a problem, because the average 60-year-old man who looks like an ex-cop cannot sit on the floor and talk to a child. But if you can do that, then you have a niche that you can go into where you can use your skills and really take advantage of them.
Well, that's a great bit of advice, Kitty. It's been amazing talking to you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your history, and your journey. You've been listening to another episode of Leaders Podcast.